It's HorrorTube here. On April 27, 1997, young men were laboring in the sugarcane fields of a small town located in the province of Sumatra in northern Indonesia. Something odd was spotted by one of the young males. He had never seen such a massive mound of dirt stacked up like a grave. The young man promptly informed the local village headman about the suspicious-looking mound of dirt. Not too long afterward, 6 of the neighborhood's strongest men got together and dug. Ironically, the deeper they dug, the worse the sickening smell became. The men reluctantly stopped excavating and requested assistance from a nearby military unit. However, the military was a little hesitant. "You guys can keep digging, and if you find any bodies, you can call us back," they replied. The 6 neighborhood men get together again in the evening to carry out their duties. And soon something drew their attention. It was a woman's nude body. They had been spot on with their prediction. There was no crime in this tiny rural community. The people were alarmed to find a naked woman's body in such a place. The cops started looking into it. First, the body was recognized as that of Dewey, a local resident who was 21 years old. Her parents hurried to the scene as soon as they heard the news. However, there was something peculiar about this physique. A corpse buried in the ground would typically be facing upwards and face down. However, Dewey was buried standing erect like a pillar with his arms extended in front of him on either side of his waist. Stated differently, she was buried head first. Before she passed away, she must have been afraid. A thorough inquiry was launched by the authorities. They discovered that Dewey had left the house 3 days prior to the event, saying he was running errands for the family and had not been back since. When the police checked to see if anyone spotted Dewey 3 days ago as they continued their investigation, a 15-year-old lad comes forward and claims to have picked him up in his rickshaw. The boy claims that day Dewey gave him a weird sense. She gave off an anxious vibe. Even stranger was the fact that after they were in the rickshaw, she continued to keep their destination a secret from him. "Go ahead," he urged as soon as Dewey got into the rickshaw. "Turn in front of here." "No, in front of me to the left," he replied. He pleaded, "Please don't do this. Please tell me where you're going." Dewey gestures to a man's home and says, "Go to Suraj's house," with caution. He was a well-known shaman who resided in the next community. His seances were well known to those in his immediate vicinity. Once they reached their destination, Dewey asked the boy one last thing: never tell anyone that he was here. Suraj, a male shaman, was called in by the police right away to see if he was connected to the case. Reluctantly, he admits that he doesn't know anything about Dewey. As all is going on, the police examine Suraj's home and discover something strange: a bracelet, a bag, and a woman's attire. Moreover, they were all owned by the deceased Dewey. Equipped with this proof, the shaman Suraj comes clean about the crime. However, his gaze abruptly changes. He starts to confess as though he's been waiting for this day for a very long time. "If my memory serves me right, I killed more women than just Dewey. The bodies were discovered 3 days ago." Suraj is detained on charges of murder and kidnapping. During the next 5 years, he admits to killing 16 additional women during interrogations. However, it's not yet time to panic. The only killing he has admitted to in the past 5 years. Does it imply he didn't commit murder before then? That's not the case. After conducting more investigation, the authorities learned that in the previous 11 years he has killed 42 women in all. Then things start to get strange. Why hasn't anyone discovered the serial killer until now? If so many women in this quiet, crime-free community are missing and buried somewhere? To start with, this particular sugarcane field was the location where he concealed all those corpses. Dewey was discovered there as well. Thus, this sugarcane field now contains at least 41 additional bodies buried there. Additionally, the Indonesian government, military, and police are all concentrating on this case as this startling news spreads. A thorough examination of the sugarcane crop starts on that day. They started by chopping down all the sugarcane. One by one, they began excavating after that. They set up forklifts and labored non-stop for several days. They began discovering 1, 2, then 3 bodies rather quickly. Expert investigation revealed that the bodies were all female, and between the ages of 11 and 30. Their heads were all buried in the same direction, which was another oddity. This was, of course, on the one identifiable body. Who were these individuals? There was an issue with the inquiry. Weather in Indonesia is extremely hot and muggy. The remains had been buried in these conditions for a very long time, and most of them were in a very poor stage of decay. We were unable to ascertain the victim's cause of death or whether there were any indications of sexual assault, because it was difficult to test the DNA from the bodies that were discovered. Suraj strongly disputes any connection to sexual assaults, which authorities concluded were the reason of the deaths since they were limited to women. He then continues by disclosing his motivations and the reasons behind his 42 woman killings. His remarks were stunning as they out from his mouth. He claims that the goal was to become a witch. Suraj is a well-known shaman in his community, as you may know. He is a purported witch doctor from Indonesia. It was widely thought that he could grant people's desires, be they for health, wealth, or marriage. Specifically, he catered mostly to female clients. Late at night, women would come to him secretly and alone to confide in him about their terrible problems. The majority of them requested amulets to put an end to their spouse's alleged infidelity. Among them was the victimized woman Dewey. Without the rickshaw guy that day, nobody would have known Dewey's whereabouts. This is when it gets interesting. For the previous 11 years, Suraj has been able to perfect his crime by having most of the women involved in the serial killing spree go to his residence covertly. When they got there, he would demand payment up front. Then, in the middle of the night, he would take the client to a sugarcane field, tell them he was going to cast a spell, and then force them to use a shovel to dig a deep hole. He would then force the ladies to stand in that hole. This is part of this witchcraft ritual, so you can rest assured, he added. He would begin to fill the pit once the women entered in with their hands and feet bound. They were terrified even with their faces exposed in this way, but they also wanted something, and since he was a shaman, they naturally trusted him. The women would be choked by Suraj once their bodies were fully buried and immobile. After giving his victims a kiss while they were out of breath, he would devour their saliva. Subsequently, he would extricate them from the earth, nude them, and reburied them with their faces directed towards his residence. The victims' faces were all turned towards Suraj's house because of this. There is no doubt that there was a purpose behind these heinous and weird killings. Shaman Suraj was convinced that he could only gain power from spirits and that he would gain power by doing this. People were curious about the origin of this notion. Suraj claimed that he had received instructions from his father in a dream. In actuality, his father was a well-known shaman as well. As per the traditional shamanic beliefs, his father was revered and obeyed by the villagers. Conversely, his son Suraj was somewhat of a troublemaker, committing both minor and major offenses from an early age and picking fights with everyone in his vicinity. He had served 10 years in prison for stealing and assault by the time he was 19. Suraj then made the decision to clear his name. He made the decision to emulate his late father as he looked into ways to accomplish so. As though he had regained his heavenly abilities, he began to disseminate rumors, and he would make extra efforts to make the village better in order to maintain the goodwill of the populace. A few years into it, your reputation begins to drastically shift. People would remark things like, "He's different because he's the son of a shaman," and stories about his extraordinary abilities would begin to spread. However, Suraj was the one who was most aware that he lacked the necessary skills to become a shaman. He therefore had constant insecurity. Then one day he had a dream about his late father. If you can get the saliva of 70 dead women, you can have great power. Suraj began his series of serial killings because he saw it as a sign. Initially, he would bury his clients in the sugarcane fields after killing them. Then he would turn to face his home. But this would take too long, he realized. Thus, we also hired sex workers to murder them. They were more inclined to commit the crime if they vanished because no one would be searching for them. In the meantime, more than 80 missing women in the neighborhood were discovered by the police as they broadened their inquiry. It's unclear, though, if Suraj killed them all. And here's another unsettling reality. As we previously stated, 6 males from the area assisted in removing the body from that sugarcane field. Suraj was one among them. He thus offered to assist with the laborious effort, but he was also the one who had the audacity to sell the body he had murdered and buried. The trial happened in December 1997 in Indonesia. The trial was being watched on TV throughout Indonesia because it was such a startling case. This is when the twist occurs. The courtroom was crowded. Suraj entered a not guilty plea to every offense. "What proof do you have that I killed all these 42 women?" he exclaimed, pointing out that the bodies had already been skeletonized, making it impossible to identify them or determine the precise cause of death. Suraj claims the cops cooked up the entire thing and he never confessed. Even with his earlier admission, the trial was ultimately canceled. It would take another 4 months to gather more murder evidence and testimony from the relatives of the victims. Suraj was ultimately found guilty of murder by the court in April 1998. It was alleged that his verdict spanned 363 pages. After that, he was given a death sentence by firing squad, which is likely the deadliest way to be executed in Indonesia. Folks, you shouldn't be shocked just yet. Now consider that. Suraj is without a doubt a fantastic serial murderer. But did he actually work by himself? It couldn't have been an easy task, even for a man, to bring his victims to a sugarcane field, dig a pit, and bury them all by himself. Yes, exactly, he did have a partner. It was the wife of Suraj. Suraj was linked to each of his 3 wives. On the day when Dewey was assassinated, Tumini, the first of those spouses, was charged with assisting Suraj. She wasn't always an accomplice, of course. However, due to Dewey's extreme shyness, he requested that one of Suraj's wives go with him to the sugarcane fields. Tumini, his first wife, consented to accompany him. She said in court that she was unaware of her husband's transgressions up to that point. In any case, the main point is that Suraj's wife assisted him in disposing of the dead that evening. After her husband was apprehended, this fact was disclosed in a confession by a guilt-ridden Tumini, who also received the death penalty. Later on, though, it was purportedly commuted to life in prison. Notably, Suraj's 2 surviving wives stated in court that they were unaware of his misdeeds, and that they had left the area not long after the incident was publicized. Suraj's execution took place in July of 2008. He was shot and died around 3 minutes later at the age of 59. Media accounts state that the Indonesian authorities tried to bury Suraj's remains at the village cemetery, but the victim's family opposed the plan so strongly that Suraj was interred in a rundown cemetery some distance away from the hamlet. You can get spiritual power by consuming the saliva of a deceased woman. This absurd notion was the starting point for 42 serial killings. Suraj would have killed many more women if he hadn't discovered Dewey, the final one he killed. His initial intention was to murder 70 people. Suraj is regarded as the worst serial killer in Indonesia. Most likely, he's currently suffering in anguish in hell. Thus far, this has been the Horror Tube. Thank you.